The snow was falling thick and fast, covering the forest in a cold, white blanket that made every sound muffled. The wind cut through like a knife, chilling the bones of anyone who dared to step outside. Among the trees, moving carefully through the drifts, was a Navy SEAL. His face was partially covered by a thermal mask, but his eyes were sharp, scanning every shadow and movement around him. He was not just on a training exercise or a routine patrol. He was on a mission that could mean life or death. Intelligence had come in a few hours ago. A police officer and her K-9 partner were missing in this remote, frozen wilderness. They had been reported gone after failing to return from a patrol, and there were signs that someone might have taken them. The SEAL knew the stakes immediately. He understood what missing could mean in such harsh conditions. Hypothermia was already a threat, and if the officer had been captured by hostile people, the danger was even greater. Every second counted, and he had to move fast but carefully. The snow made the terrain difficult. Every step required effort, and heavy boots sank with each movement. Despite this, the SEAL moved confidently, trained to handle the worst conditions nature could throw at him. His body was conditioned for endurance, his mind always alert, analyzing every sound, every shift of wind, every footprint in the snow. As he progressed, he could see that the snow had already covered most tracks, but there were still signs. A small, broken branch here, a crushed patch of snow there. They were subtle clues, but his training allowed him to read them like a map. The officer and her dog had likely been moving through the forest, trying to find a safe place or escape whoever had taken them. The SEAL's mind ran through every possibility. He knew that the officer was trained in basic survival, but he also knew that alone and in such freezing conditions, she could not last long. The dog could help, but even the most loyal K-9 could only do so much against human threats. The air was heavy, cold, and filled with the quiet tension of the forest. Occasionally, the SEAL would hear distant sounds, branches cracking under the weight of snow, an owl hooting far above, the soft rush of wind. Every noise could mean something, and he treated them all as important. He slowed down at times, crouching low behind snow-covered trees to listen and observe. It was not just a rescue. It was a test of his instincts, patience, and training. Every decision could save a life or cost it. The SEAL also thought about the officer and her K-9. He knew the bond between them was strong. They worked together, trained together, and relied on each other completely. He imagined the officer struggling to stay warm, keeping the dog close, trying to stay calm even if her fear was rising. The dog, trained to protect and assist, would be alert to every danger, every sound, every movement in the snow. The thought of them alone, possibly injured or restrained, pushed him to move faster, though without rushing recklessly. As he continued through the snow, he noticed the terrain was changing. The forest was thinning, and the ground was uneven, with hidden ditches and rocks beneath the snow. Each step required careful balance, and the SEAL's training kicked in automatically. He adjusted his weight, checked his footing, and kept scanning ahead. He also had to be careful of leaving traces. He didn't want anyone who might be following to predict his moves. The forest was a dangerous puzzle, but he was determined to solve it. Despite the freezing wind, the SEAL kept a steady pace, using his breath and instincts to navigate. He checked his compass, his map, and the last intelligence reports repeatedly, making sure he was heading in the right direction. Every detail mattered, and he understood that the officer and her dog were depending on him. The thought of failure was not acceptable. He also thought about the dog, how it would likely recognize his approach if he got close. The K-9 was trained to protect, to assess threat, and to act when necessary. That bond between officer and dog, and their courage, was a factor that the SEAL respected deeply. As the light began to fade in the afternoon, casting long shadows across the snow, the SEAL felt a mix of urgency and focus. The forest seemed endless, but he trusted his training, his instincts, and his determination. He could almost feel the presence of the missing officer and her dog somewhere ahead, hidden but waiting for rescue. He imagined her courage, her fear, and her reliance on the dog, and that thought gave him more determination. Each step brought him closer, and he knew that very soon, He would face whatever danger lay ahead and, if he acted wisely, bring them to safety. In that cold, silent forest, a highly trained seal moved like a shadow, carrying not just the hope of a rescue mission, but the weight of lives depending entirely on him. The snow fell steadily, the wind howled, but his focus never wavered. The search for a missing officer and her loyal K9 had just begun, and he was ready to face the challenge, no matter how harsh or dangerous it might be. Every instinct, every decision, and every careful step would be crucial in the next moments, where survival depended on skill, courage, and the unspoken bond between humans and dogs in the line of duty. The seal moved carefully, his eyes scanning every inch of the snowy forest. The silence was broken only by the crunch of his boots on the snow and the occasional gust of wind shaking the trees. But despite the stillness, he could sense that something was off. There was a strange pattern in the snow, as if someone or something had moved in a hurry, leaving traces that were half covered by the falling snow. He crouched, studying the area closely, noticing a broken branch here, a scuffed patch of snow there. These were small signs, easy to miss if someone was untrained, but to him they told a story. Someone had struggled here. Someone had been running, hiding, or perhaps dragging something or someone. His heart did not race, but his mind sharpened. The seal knew that these small clues were important. In a place like this, where the weather itself was an enemy, even minor mistakes could be fatal. Each footprint, each broken twig could tell him who had passed, what they had done, and in which direction they had gone. He had learned to read these subtle details in years of training and missions, but the thought of the missing officer and her K9 heightened every sense. He imagined the officer, trained, strong but alone and probably struggling to stay warm. And the dog, loyal and protective, must have been on high alert, trying to protect its partner in the cold wilderness. The snow was getting deeper, and the wind was picking up. The seal tightened his gloves and pulled his jacket closer, knowing he had to keep moving. Hypothermia could set in within minutes in these temperatures, especially for someone exposed and possibly restrained. The seal's eyes caught a small depression in the snow ahead, like someone had fallen or been forced to the ground. He approached slowly, every muscle tense, ready to react to whatever he might find. The forest around him seemed alive with hidden dangers. A misstep could injure him, and if the officer or her dog were nearby, they could be in just as much danger. As he moved forward, he noticed the tracks were not just human. There was a smaller, paw-like pattern alongside the footprints. It confirmed his suspicion. The officer's K9 was nearby. That realization gave him hope, but also added pressure. The dog would have been loyal, protective, and probably defensive if anyone approached. The seal knew he had to be cautious, not just for himself but to avoid startling the dog and causing harm to the officer. The wind carried faint sounds, and he paused to listen. There was a subtle rustling, like movement hidden behind snow-laden branches. Could it be the missing pair? Or was it someone else? Every detail mattered. The seal's training had taught him to trust instincts, but he also relied on observation. He crouched behind a tree, peering through a small gap in the branches, and scanned the area. Shadows shifted in the falling snow, and the forest seemed endless. The cold was biting, but he barely noticed. His focus was absolute. He continued to follow the tracks carefully, noticing signs of struggle. Snow was disturbed in unnatural ways, as if someone had tried to crawl or had been dragged. A torn piece of fabric clung to a branch, a possible clue from the officer's uniform. The seal felt a surge of urgency. Whoever had done this might still be nearby, and the officer needed help immediately. He also realized the K9 must have sensed danger long before he did, protecting the officer as best as it could. As he moved deeper, the seal considered every possibility. The officer might be hiding, injured, or restrained. The dog could be alert, aggressive, or fearful. His plan had to account for both. He adjusted his pace, moving slower and quieter, using every skill he had learned to avoid detection and stay safe. The forest was deceptive. Even the slightest noise could travel far in the snow, and the wrong movement could alert anyone nearby. Despite the danger, the seal remained calm. His breathing was steady, his mind sharp. He imagined what the officer and her dog had gone through. Hours of exposure to the cold, fear of capture, and the struggle to survive. He felt respect for their courage. The dog, loyal and brave, would not have left her side for a second. That loyalty, combined with the officer's training, meant they could survive longer than ordinary people, but they still needed rescue. Suddenly, he noticed something unusual. A faint smell of smoke mixed with the cold air. Perhaps someone had built a small fire for warmth, or perhaps it was a warning signal. Either way, it confirmed he was on the right track. His instincts screamed that the missing officer was close. The tracks led him toward a small clearing, partially hidden by trees and snow. The seal crouched, observing carefully before moving forward. Every muscle in his body was ready, every sense alert. The forest was treacherous, but he felt a connection to the environment, as if it were guiding him toward the missing pair. He had learned to trust this feeling on past missions, and he did so now. He thought about the officer, likely exhausted, cold, and scared, relying on her K9 to protect her. That bond, he realized, was a powerful force, perhaps the key to ensuring their survival until he reached them. Step by careful step, he moved closer to the source of the tracks, mentally preparing for whatever he might find. The wind blew snow across his face, the cold biting, but he felt a surge of determination. The forest held its secrets well, but the seal was trained to uncover them. Every subtle sign brought him closer, every clue a piece of the puzzle. And deep inside, he knew that soon, he would reach the missing officer and her loyal K9, and their ordeal in the freezing snow would finally meet a chance for salvation. After hours of careful tracking through the snow-covered forest, the seal finally reached a small clearing. His eyes instantly caught something unusual against the stark white of the snow, a figure lying low, almost hidden by a mound of snow and branches. He froze, scanning the area for any signs of movement or danger. The closer he got, the more details became clear. It was the officer. She was bound, her hands and feet restrained, and she looked exhausted, pale and barely conscious. Her uniform was torn and soaked with snow, evidence of the struggle she had endured. The sight hit the seal hard. Every trained instinct in him shouted that time was critical. She could not survive long like this without help. Nearby, a large K9 sat, tense and alert, its ears pricked and eyes scanning every direction. The dog's posture was defensive, muscles taut, ready to attack at the slightest threat. The seal understood immediately. This was no ordinary dog. It was a highly trained service animal, trained to protect its human partner at all costs. Despite the snow, cold, and exhaustion, the K9 had stayed with the officer, refusing to leave her side even for a moment. The loyalty and courage of the dog impressed him deeply. He knew he had to approach carefully to avoid alarming it while also preparing to act quickly to secure the officer. The seal moved slowly, keeping low and using the terrain for cover. He scanned the surroundings for any signs of who might have captured the officer. There were footprints leading to this clearing, some partially covered by fresh snow, some more distinct. The footprints suggested a struggle, but the trail seemed to end here. Whoever had done this had likely moved on or hidden nearby, leaving the officer and her K9 exposed to the freezing elements. He felt a mix of relief and urgency. Relief that he had found her. Urgency because every second she remained in the snow was dangerous. As he neared, the officer stirred slightly, a weak groan escaping her lips. The K9 growled softly, protective but not yet aggressive toward him. The seal knew he had to communicate without frightening the dog. He spoke in low, calm tones, letting the K9 know he was there to help. The dog's ears twitched, and its body remained tense but did not lunge. The officer's eyes opened slowly, filled with confusion and fear, but she recognized the authority and skill in the seal's movements. She tried to speak, but her voice was weak. The seal nodded reassuringly, indicating that he would get her out safely. He quickly assessed her condition. She was shivering violently from the cold, her skin pale, lips blue, and breathing shallow. The seal knew she could not survive long without warmth and protection. Her restraints had to be removed carefully to avoid injury, and he also had to manage the canine, ensuring it stayed calm but ready to defend if necessary. Every action had to be precise and deliberate. His training kicked in automatically. He reached for her bindings, working swiftly but silently. The dog's eyes never left him, muscles coiled, tail stiff. The seal spoke gently, using soothing words and slow movements to show he was no threat. The dog's growl gradually softened, but it stayed close to the officer, a silent guardian. As the last restraint was removed, the officer pulled her arms to her chest, trying to warm herself and regain strength. The seal noticed her wounds, small cuts and bruises from the struggle, but nothing life-threatening if treated soon. He carefully lifted her, supporting her weakened body. The dog immediately moved to her side, brushing against her protectively. The seal glanced around the clearing once more. There were no immediate threats, but the surrounding forest was still dangerous. Hidden predators, unstable snow, and the possibility of the captors returning were all concerns. He made a mental map of the safest path through the trees, keeping in mind the officer's fragile condition and the dog's need for space to move safely. The K9 remained alert, occasionally growling softly at distant sounds, signaling that danger was not entirely gone. Despite the danger and exhaustion, a moment of understanding passed between the officer, the dog, and the seal. Words were not necessary. Their goal was clear: survive and get to safety. The bond between the officer and her K9 shone through in that moment. The seal respected it deeply, knowing that this loyalty had kept her alive until he arrived. He also felt a surge of pride and responsibility. This was why he had trained for years, to handle situations exactly like this, where every action mattered, and every decision could mean the difference between life and death. The officer tried to whisper something, but the cold had weakened her voice. The seal leaned closer, encouraging her to conserve energy while giving her hope. The dog's eyes never left the seal, measuring his every move, but slowly, it began to relax slightly. The seal knew that the dog's reaction was crucial. If the dog trusted him, it would assist in ensuring a smooth extraction. If the dog felt threatened, the situation could turn dangerous instantly. Finally, he made his plan. He would secure the officer, maintain the dog's trust, and move carefully towards safety. The clearing was open enough for him to maneuver, but still covered partially by trees, allowing stealth in case any threat returned. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility but also the determination that came with training and experience. The officer and her K9 had endured a terrifying ordeal, and now, thanks to his careful tracking and persistence, they had a chance to survive and get back to safety. In that quiet, snow-filled clearing, the seal, the officer, and her K9 prepared for the next stage of the mission. The air was cold, the snow deep, and the forest still full of hidden dangers. But in that moment, a connection formed, a bond of trust, loyalty, and determination. The officer's survival, the K9's protection, and the seal's skill combined into a single goal: escape the wilderness and return to safety, together. It was a moment of both relief and heightened tension, setting the stage for the challenges that lay ahead. As the seal carefully moved closer to the officer, he felt the intensity of the moment grow. The officer, weak and shivering, was barely able to hold herself upright, but her K9 remained completely alert. The dog's eyes were sharp, its ears pricked forward, and every muscle in its body was tense. The seal knew instantly that this was no ordinary reaction. It was pure instinct, loyalty, and protective training rolled into one. The dog had been through hours, perhaps even days of uncertainty, cold, and fear, yet it had not left the officer's side for even a moment. It was as if the dog had become her shield, silently telling the world that anyone approaching needed to prove they were trustworthy. The seal slowed his steps, speaking softly, using calm, low tones to show that he was not a threat. "I'm here to help," he said quietly, his voice barely louder than the whisper of the wind through the snow-laden trees. The dog's ears twitched at his words, its body stiffening further, ready to react if the human was not telling the truth. The seal understood immediately. The dog's reaction was not just about guarding. It was a test. The animal was trying to figure out if this new presence meant help or harm. Suddenly, the dog let out a low, warning growl, a deep rumble that vibrated in the cold air. It circled around the officer protectively, its eyes never leaving the seal. The officer flinched slightly, exhausted and in pain, but there was a glimmer of hope in her eyes. She seemed to sense that the seal was there to help, and that her loyal canine had already judged him. The bond between the officer and her dog was extraordinary. Even in exhaustion and danger, the dog had maintained a clear, unwavering focus. Protect her human partner. The seal knew this bond was critical. If he could earn the dog's trust, it would make the rescue much safer and more effective. The seal slowly reached into his pack and pulled out a small piece of emergency food. He crouched low, showing the dog that he meant no harm. He tossed the treat a short distance away and then slowly moved his hands into clear view, palms open. The dog's eyes followed his every move, evaluating him with caution. After a tense few seconds, the dog inched closer, sniffing the air, still wary but no longer aggressively defensive. This small sign of trust was a huge relief to the seal. He knew that in situations like this, the dog's cooperation could make the difference between a smooth rescue and a dangerous struggle. The officer, sensing the small breakthrough, managed a weak smile. She whispered her gratitude, her voice almost lost in the wind. Even in her weakened state, she trusted her K9's judgment. The seal carefully moved closer to her, keeping his body relaxed and his movements slow and deliberate. The dog's protective instincts never waned, but the shift in its posture showed that it recognized the seal as an ally. It remained close to the officer, brushing against her and positioning itself between her and the seal, silently confirming its role as her guardian. As he prepared to free her from the restraints, the seal noticed the intelligence in the dog's eyes. It was watching his every movement, alert to the smallest gesture. He knew that if he acted suddenly or carelessly, the dog might attack, thinking it was protecting the officer. So he proceeded methodically, keeping his hands visible and moving slowly. Step by step, he removed the officer's bindings, all the while speaking to her dog in soft, soothing tones. Gradually, the tension in the dog's muscles began to ease, but it never strayed far from the officer. Once the last restraint was removed, the officer leaned against the seal for support, shivering from both fear and cold. The K9 immediately positioned itself alongside her, nudging her gently with its nose and offering warmth and reassurance. The seal realized then how remarkable this bond was. While he could provide technical skill, strength, and strategy, the K9 provided emotional support, protection, and an unwavering presence that no human could fully replicate. The loyalty and courage of the dog had kept the officer alive until this moment, and the seal felt immense respect for the animal. The seal also had to assess the surroundings carefully. The forest remained a dangerous place, and any sudden noises could signal a return of the captors or other threats. He made a mental note of the safest path through the clearing while keeping both the officer and her dog calm and ready to move. The dog stayed alert, but no longer aggressive. It had accepted the seal's presence, recognizing him as an ally rather than a threat. It was clear to the seal that the dog's trust had to remain intact for the next phase of the mission, the escape. Despite the exhaustion and danger, a sense of calm settled over the three of them. The officer leaned on her K9 for support, the dog remaining vigilant yet composed, and the seal readied himself to guide them out of the snow-covered forest. The dog's reaction had told him everything he needed to know. The officer was alive, her trust in her companion unshaken, and now, with careful handling, she could trust him as well. This silent communication, this understanding among the three of them was remarkable. It was more than training or instinct. It was a shared will to survive and protect one another. The seal felt a surge of determination. He had found the officer, gained the dog's trust, and assessed the immediate danger. Now they had to move quickly but cautiously. The bond between the officer and her K9 had guided him to this point, and he knew that respecting that bond was essential for the rescue to succeed. Every step forward would be critical, and every decision could make the difference between life and death. In that snowy clearing, surrounded by the stillness of the forest, the seal, the officer, and her K9 formed a team. They understood each other without words, the dog's loyalty, the officer's trust, and the seal's skill all aligned toward a single goal: survival and escape. The forest was cold and dangerous, but for the first time in hours, there was hope. The dog's reaction had said it all. They were ready to face the next challenge together. With the officer freed from her restraints and her K9 loyal and alert by her side, the seal now faced the most critical part of the mission: getting them safely out of the snow-covered forest. He knew that every step had to be calculated, every decision precise. The environment was as much of an enemy as any potential captors, with deep snow, hidden ice patches, and the ever-present danger of exposure to freezing temperatures. But the seal had been trained for moments like this. His mind, sharpened by years of missions, scanned the terrain and devised a plan for extraction. He motioned for the officer to lean on him slightly for support. Even though she was a trained officer, the ordeal had weakened her considerably. Her legs shook with exhaustion, and her breathing was shallow from both fear and the cold. The K9 stayed close to her, brushing against her side, offering both warmth and protection. The seal's eyes constantly flicked around the clearing, checking for any signs of danger. Movements in the trees, shadows shifting in the snow, or any unusual noises. The forest was quiet, but he knew better than to trust silence completely. The seal decided to move slowly and deliberately. He led the officer in short, careful steps, helping her maintain balance through the deep snow. He had to consider the dog as well, whose instinct was to be slightly ahead, scouting for threats, but still staying close enough to the officer. The coordination of the three of them became essential. It was like a silent dance. Each movement needed to be synchronized, or the risk of injury or detection would increase dramatically. The dog occasionally glanced at the seal, almost as if asking silently, "Can I trust him?" The seal knew that trust had been built in the previous moments, but it had to be maintained throughout the extraction. As they moved through the forest, the seal kept scanning for the safest route. Some areas had hidden crevices and thin ice covering shallow streams, dangerous if stepped on without caution. Every patch of snow looked identical, but his training allowed him to spot subtle differences, changes in texture, color, and consistency that indicated potential hazards. He carefully guided the officer and her dog around these dangers, sometimes having to step ahead to test the ground. It was exhausting, but there was no room for mistakes. One wrong step could trigger a fall or injury, putting all three of them at risk. The officer struggled at times, her body weak and trembling, but the K9 remained her constant support. At one point, the dog nudged her forward, urging her to keep moving despite the fatigue. It was an almost human gesture, a combination of instinct and training. The seal watched this with respect. The dog's dedication to its partner was unwavering, and it was clear that the officer drew as much strength from the dog as from the seal's assistance. Together, the three of them formed a small, determined team against the hostile environment. Every so often, the seal paused to let the officer rest, using these brief moments to assess the surroundings. He noticed subtle changes in the snow, footprints that didn't match theirs, a broken branch lying at an odd angle, or faint shadows that might indicate distant threats. He explained quietly to the officer to stay low and trust him, while the dog remained vigilant, ears moving with every sound. The tension was high. They were not yet completely safe, and the forest could hide dangers that even the seal had to respect. To ease the officer's fatigue, the seal adjusted his grip, supporting her under the arms and using his strength to carry a little of her weight when necessary. The dog responded intuitively, staying close and scanning ahead. Its protective behavior was flawless. It positioned itself between the officer and any potential threat while also leading them along safer paths. The seal understood that the K9's behavior could also act as a warning system, detecting hidden dangers before he could see them. This silent coordination was vital. As they neared a small hill that would take them out of the dense forest, the seal noticed fresh footprints on the snow above. He froze and scanned the area carefully. These tracks suggested someone or something was approaching. It could be the captors returning or simply another danger in the forest. The seal made a split-second decision, signaling the officer to stay low and instructing the dog to remain calm but ready. The snow muffled sounds, but the seal's trained ears could detect faint movements. They paused, waiting, holding their breath in the cold, tense silence. After a few moments, the tracks became distant, and the immediate danger seemed to pass. The seal let out a quiet sigh of relief but knew the mission wasn't over. The extraction was still the most dangerous part. Moving an exhausted human and a protective K9 through deep snow in freezing conditions was a challenge even for a seasoned operator. He adjusted their positions and continued, ensuring that the officer could lean on him while the dog stayed between them and potential threats. The path gradually led them toward a small, partially cleared area. The seal spotted faint signs of a route that would eventually connect to where a helicopter or support team could extract them safely. He guided the officer carefully, explaining the importance of each cautious step. The K9 moved naturally, almost as if it understood the plan, keeping the officer safe while also scanning for hazards. Their progress was slow, but steady, every movement calculated, every pause purposeful. By coordinating their steps, relying on instincts, and respecting the bond between the officer and her dog, the seal was able to turn what could have been a chaotic escape into a disciplined, controlled extraction. The forest was still dangerous, and the snow continued to fall, but the seal had created a system of movement that maximized safety and minimized risk. The officer's strength slowly returned as she trusted the seal's guidance, while the dog's vigilance never faltered. In that moment, it became clear how critical teamwork and trust were in life-or-death situations. The seal's skills, the officer's resilience, and the dog's unwavering loyalty combined to create a coordinated effort against the harsh winter wilderness. Step by step, they moved closer to safety, each moment building a bridge between peril and survival. The snow grew deeper as the seal, the officer, and her K9 pushed onward. Each step required more effort, as the powdery drifts threatened to swallow their boots and slow their progress. The cold was relentless, cutting through clothing and chilling their bones, but the seal moved with focus and determination, keeping a steady pace that the officer could manage. She leaned on him for support, trusting his strength to carry them through the harsh, unforgiving landscape. The K9, trained for endurance and alertness, stayed close, occasionally looking ahead and sniffing the air for any hint of danger. His presence was a source of reassurance for both the officer and the seal. The seal's mind worked constantly, analyzing every detail of the surroundings. The forest around them was deceptive. Snow-covered rocks, hidden streams, and fallen branches created treacherous obstacles. He made sure to avoid any area where they could slip or fall, stepping first to test the ground and signaling the officer to follow. The dog, aware of the hidden hazards, would sometimes pause and growl softly, alerting the seal that he needed to adjust their route. It was a silent but perfect communication between them, a team moving together in the face of danger. At one point, the officer stumbled, her legs weak from hours of struggle and exposure to the freezing cold. The seal immediately caught her, holding her close while steadying his own footing. The K9 reacted instantly, circling them protectively and standing between the seal and any possible threats. The dog's loyalty and instinct were unmatched. It would not let anyone or anything harm its human partner, and its presence gave the seal a small but powerful advantage. He could focus on moving them forward without worrying about sudden attacks from unseen enemies. The wind howled through the trees, carrying sharp, icy gusts that stung their faces. Visibility was reduced, with snow blowing in every direction. The seal had to rely on more than just sight. He listened for subtle sounds. The crunch of snow underfoot, the snap of branches, the faint echoes that might indicate someone or something following them. Every step was measured, calculated, and cautious. The officer's breathing grew more labored, and the seal made sure to encourage her quietly, whispering words of reassurance. "Almost there," he said. "Just keep moving. We'll get out of this together." The dog stayed alert, nudging her gently when she faltered, silently reminding her to keep going. They approached a small ravine, partially hidden under snow. Crossing it required careful coordination. The seal led, finding a narrow, stable path over icy rocks, testing each foothold before stepping. The officer followed, gripping his arm tightly, while the dog went ahead slightly, sniffing the air and making sure the path was safe. One wrong move could mean a fall that might trap them or cause serious injury, and the seal's heart beat faster as he guided them carefully across. Step by step, they made it safely to the other side, the officer's relief and the dog's satisfied stance signaling their small victory. As they climbed a small incline, the seal noticed faint tracks in the snow. They weren't fresh, but they indicated that someone had recently been in the area. His senses heightened instantly. It could be the captors returning, or another potential threat in the forest. He slowed their pace, signaling both the officer and the dog to stay low. The dog's posture became even more tense, muscles coiled, ears forward, ready to react. The seal scanned the area, careful not to make any noise that could reveal their position. The tension was palpable. Every movement had to be precise, every sound controlled. For several minutes, they moved cautiously, pausing frequently to let the officer catch her breath and ensure the dog remained calm yet alert. The seal realized how critical the canine's instincts were. The dog could sense dangers that he might miss, and its protective behavior gave them an edge. He also thought about the officer's courage. Despite exhaustion, she stayed strong, relying on both the dog and the seal to guide her through the snow. The bond between the three of them was remarkable, a silent but powerful alliance against the harsh wilderness. As they neared a more open area, the seal spotted the faint glint of sunlight reflecting off something in the distance, likely a path or clearing that led toward extraction. Hope surged, but he knew the final stretch could be the most dangerous. Open areas left them exposed, and any hidden threat could strike quickly. The officer needed protection, the dog needed reassurance, and the seal had to move with absolute precision. He adjusted their formation. The dog stayed close to the officer, scanning ahead and behind, while the seal guided them from the side, ready to intervene at any moment. The cold had begun to take a toll, numbing their fingers and toes, but their determination did not waver. The officer leaned heavily on the seal, drawing strength from his guidance and the canine's presence. The dog occasionally looked back at the seal, as if checking that everything was moving according to plan. It was remarkable how seamlessly the three of them coordinated, relying on instincts, training, and mutual trust to navigate the treacherous terrain. Finally, they reached a point where the trees thinned, revealing the faint outline of a clearing beyond. The seal allowed a brief moment of relief, knowing that extraction would soon be possible. The officer's face brightened slightly, and the dog's body relaxed, though it remained vigilant. They had made it through the worst of the forest, surviving extreme cold, hidden hazards, and the constant threat of danger. Their teamwork, resilience, and trust had carried them through, and the seal knew that the final challenge, getting to safety, was now within reach. As they moved forward, the seal felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. Every calculated step, every pause, every careful observation had brought them closer to survival. The forest was still dangerous, but the immediate threat of the deep snow and harsh conditions had been navigated successfully. For the officer and her canine, the ordeal was far from over, but hope had returned. And for the seal, the mission continued with renewed focus, knowing that together, they could overcome whatever lay ahead. After what felt like an endless struggle through the snow-covered forest, the seal, the officer, and her canine finally approached a small clearing. For the first time in hours, there was a sense of safety in the air, though the seal remained cautious. He knew that the forest, unpredictable and dangerous, could still hide threats. Every instinct told him to remain alert until they were completely out of the wilderness. But as the light from the sun reflected off the snow, he could see a faint outline of figures in the distance. Members of the support team waiting at a designated extraction point. Relief surged through him. The worst of the mission, the cold, exhaustion, and hidden dangers of the forest, was finally almost behind them. The officer, exhausted and weakened, leaned heavily on the seal. Her legs trembled, and her face was pale from the cold and lack of proper nourishment. But she kept moving, trusting him completely. The K9 stayed close, brushing against her, alert yet calm, sensing that the danger had lessened. The dog's loyalty had never wavered. It had been her constant protector, guiding and guarding her through the perilous journey. The seal allowed a brief moment for them to regain their balance, checking her breathing and adjusting his support as necessary. He knew they could not relax completely until they were safely out, but seeing the extraction team in the distance offered hope and motivation. As they approached the clearing, the seal kept scanning the area for potential threats. Even though the immediate danger seemed to have passed, he understood that exposure in open areas could be risky. Any movement, any noise could attract unwanted attention. He adjusted the officer's position, ensuring she could move safely and that the dog remained between them and any potential danger. Step by careful step, they moved forward, maintaining a balance between speed and caution. The support team noticed them and signaled their readiness, waving them toward the extraction point. Relief was visible on their faces. They had prepared for this rescue, but they knew the journey through the snow had been treacherous. The seal allowed himself a small moment of satisfaction, seeing that his careful planning and leadership had brought the officer and her K9 to safety. But his focus never wavered. The final steps of extraction required as much precision as the journey through the forest. As the officer neared the support team, she stumbled slightly from exhaustion. The seal caught her immediately, steadying her and whispering words of encouragement. The K9, sensing the nearing safety, relaxed slightly but remained watchful. Its protective instincts were still active, but it also seemed to understand that they were almost home. The bond between the officer and her K9 was evident. Every move, every glance, every small action showed a relationship built on trust, loyalty, and shared experience. The seal admired the teamwork, knowing that the dog had been as essential to the officer's survival as he had been. The extraction team moved quickly to assist. Medics approached with blankets and emergency supplies. The officer was wrapped in warm layers and given water and a small emergency ration to restore her energy. The K9 received attention as well, with the team praising its dedication and loyalty. The seal watched silently, allowing the officers and the dog to receive care, knowing that their ordeal was finally nearing an end. The tension that had gripped him for hours slowly began to release, replaced by relief and pride in a mission well executed. Even in the safety of the clearing, the seal remained vigilant. He continued to scan the perimeter, ensuring that no new threats appeared while the officer was being treated. His experience told him that danger could appear unexpectedly, and staying alert was necessary until full extraction. But seeing the officer regain color in her cheeks and the K9 wagging its tail slightly reassured him that their immediate struggle had ended. The officer looked at the seal with gratitude, her voice still weak but filled with emotion. She whispered thanks, and the seal nodded, understanding that words were unnecessary. The bond formed in the snow, through danger and teamwork, spoke louder than any expression of gratitude. The K9 brushed against her again, nudging her gently, as if sharing in the relief and pride. The seal allowed himself a brief smile, knowing that the loyalty and courage of both human and dog had made this rescue possible. As the helicopter approached, signaling the final phase of extraction, the seal guided the officer and her K9 toward it carefully. Every step remained controlled. Even in the face of relief, he maintained vigilance. The K9, sensing the approaching safety, became more relaxed but still maintained its protective posture. It was clear that the dog's instincts would never be fully turned off. It had fulfilled its duty and would continue to watch over its partner. Once aboard the helicopter, the officer was finally able to sit and rest properly. The K9 curled up beside her, alert but calm, providing warmth and reassurance. The seal remained nearby, ensuring their safety until they were fully secure. The forest below, filled with snow and hidden dangers, was left behind, and for the first time in hours, there was a sense of true relief. The officer had survived, the K9 had remained loyal and vigilant, and the seal had successfully executed the mission. In that moment, the seal reflected on what had just transpired. It was more than a rescue. It was a demonstration of courage, loyalty, and teamwork. The officer's determination, the K9's unwavering protection, and his own training and judgment had combined to overcome extreme challenges. The mission would be remembered not just for its danger but for the bonds formed and the lives saved. As the helicopter lifted into the sky, carrying the officer, her K9, and the SEAL toward safety, there was a quiet sense of accomplishment. The ordeal through the frozen forest was over, but the memory of the courage, loyalty, and resilience would stay with all three forever. The SEAL allowed himself a moment to breathe, knowing that the mission's success was a testament to the strength of trust, teamwork, and the unbreakable bond between humans and their loyal companions. Once the helicopter had lifted off from the snowy clearing, leaving behind the frozen forest and all its dangers, a sense of relief finally settled over the SEAL, the officer, and her K9. The officer, still wrapped in warm blankets, felt the first real comfort she had experienced since the ordeal began. Her body, stiff and exhausted from hours of struggle in the cold, slowly began to relax. The K9, ever loyal, stayed close to her side, resting its head on her lap while keeping its sharp eyes alert, scanning the interior of the helicopter. Even in safety, the dog remained vigilant, its protective instincts deeply ingrained, ensuring that its partner was never alone or vulnerable. The SEAL observed quietly, giving both the officer and her K9 space to recover, though he remained alert. His mind replayed every moment of the mission, the careful tracking through deep snow, the discovery of the officer and her bound limbs, the tense negotiation of trust with the dog, and the meticulous navigation of the forest during the extraction. Each step had been crucial, and he knew how close things could have come to disaster. He felt a deep sense of satisfaction and relief, not from glory or recognition, but from knowing that they had survived, that their courage and loyalty had triumphed over danger. As the helicopter flew toward the nearest safe base, the officer finally spoke, her voice weak but filled with emotion. She expressed gratitude, not only for the SEAL's skill and bravery but for the calm and careful manner in which he had handled her K9. She understood that without the dog's trust, the rescue could have been far more complicated, or even impossible. The SEAL nodded, acknowledging her words, but said little. His focus had always been on action, not on praise. He understood that the true measure of success was in the lives saved and the bond strengthened through the ordeal. The K9, sensing the officer's emotions, relaxed slightly more but remained alert, occasionally shifting to ensure its partner was comfortable. The dog's unwavering loyalty had been remarkable throughout the mission. From the first moment of danger to the final steps aboard the helicopter, it had acted as both protector and guide. Its reactions, its trust, and its courage had saved precious time and provided an additional layer of security that allowed the SEAL to concentrate on navigating the terrain and managing the officer's safety. Watching this bond, the SEAL felt respect not only for the officer's determination but also for the extraordinary devotion of her K9. As the helicopter neared the base, the officer's energy gradually returned. She spoke softly to the dog, praising it for its courage and dedication, her tone filled with relief and affection. The dog responded with small gestures, nudges, shifts, and gentle licks that communicated understanding and reassurance. Their bond, already strong, had been tested under extreme conditions, and it had emerged even stronger. The SEAL observed them quietly, appreciating the quiet heroism displayed not in words or medals, but in loyalty, trust, and courage under pressure. Upon landing, medics and support personnel immediately approached to assist the officer and the K9. The SEAL helped guide her out carefully, mindful of her still weak condition, while the dog remained steadfastly at her side. Every person who saw the K9's alert posture and focused attention understood its importance, not just as a working dog but as a lifeline for its partner. The SEAL, though ready to step back, stayed close until he was confident that both the officer and her dog were fully in capable hands. As she received medical attention, the officer looked back at the SEAL, her eyes filled with gratitude and respect. In those moments, words were almost unnecessary. The shared experience, the life-threatening danger, the teamwork, and the trust built in the snow and freezing forest spoke volumes. The K9, sensing the calm, finally allowed itself to relax fully, curling up and resting, though still glancing occasionally at its partner, as if ensuring her continued safety. The seal knew that this bond, tested under extreme conditions, was stronger than any challenge they could face in the future. Later, as the officer recovered and began to regain strength, she shared her reflections on the ordeal. She spoke of the fear and exhaustion, but also of the courage it took to survive, the instinctual guidance of her K9, and the SEAL's calm leadership. She realized that survival in such extreme conditions relied not just on skill or strength but on trust, loyalty, and the silent communication that had developed among the three of them. The dog's actions, its unwavering focus and protective instincts, had provided both reassurance and practical support that words alone could not convey. The SEAL reflected quietly on the mission as well. He thought about the hours in the forest, the calculated decisions, and the trust he had earned from the K9. He understood that the true success of the operation was in the bond that had formed between human and dog, between the officer and himself. The mission had been a test of skill, endurance, and courage, but it had also been a lesson in the power of loyalty and teamwork. In the most challenging circumstances, the strength of trust and partnership could make all the difference between life and death. By the time the officer was fully stabilized and the K9 had received care, the SEAL allowed himself to relax. The danger was over, the mission complete, and the lives of both the officer and her loyal companion were safe. The forest, the snow, and the hidden threats were now behind them, but the lessons of courage, loyalty, and teamwork remained indelibly impressed on all of them. The K9, the officer, and the SEAL had faced extreme adversity together, and each had relied on the others in ways that were both extraordinary and unforgettable. In the end, the story was not just about survival in the harsh wilderness. It was about courage, trust, and the unbreakable bonds that can form between humans and animals, and among those who act with skill and honor in the face of danger. The officer, her K9, and the SEAL had endured the impossible together, and the experience would remain with them forever, a testament to loyalty, bravery, and the quiet heroism that often goes unseen but is deeply felt.